minutes, dropping trees, damaging water lines and roofs, and causing other issues across a 4-block area. The Trump administration is asking the Supreme Court to let it end birthright citizenship, affecting many people of color. It argues the lower courts went too far when it handed down nationwide injunctions that blocked the policy. Kanye West is still making controversial comments about Nazism. This time it involved country singer Morgan Wallen. On X, the rapper posted a screenshot of a text message he sent to Wallen, who previously received backlash after being recorded saying a racial slur. Michelle Obama is making her first public appearance in 3 months. She appeared with her brother at a festival for the live taping of their new podcast called IMO. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
I love you, cheeky baby.
What? Love who? Shh, you don't even know what love is. This is a message for those who think they know what love is, but really don't. You better watch yourself, cause love is a tricky game, and you just might get caught.
The following is a paid program and does not necessarily express the views or opinions of Equity Media, its management, staff, or affiliates of WBOK 1230.
Now, it's the Monitor's Mic with your host, Stella Cement.
Welcome to the Monitor's Mic, where we talk oversight, policing, and you. I'm Stella Cement, your host and the Independent Police Monitor for the City of New Orleans, and with me is Chriselle Williams, our Deputy Police Monitor. This show is your go-to source for discussing policing, law enforcement oversight, and how it all impacts you. We're here to inform and empower you by unraveling the complexities of policing, updating you on the consent decree, and engaging in conversations that matter on policing, oversight, and the community. From the Office of the Independent Police Monitor, we offer an independent perspective on city government. The Office of the Independent Police Monitor, OIPM, serves as a crucial civilian oversight body for the New Orleans Police Department, NOPD. We ensure transparency and accountability within the police department by making sure the NOPD follows their policies, abides by the consent decree, and is compliant with all local, state, and federal laws. Our office operates independently from the NOPD and the federal monitors, allowing us to provide an impartial input into police practices and investigations. What do we do day to day? We take complaints of officer misconduct from the public and from police officers. We review misconduct investigations conducted by the NOPD's Internal Affairs, which is called the Public Integrity Bureau. We're on call 24 hours a day, every day of the year for officer-involved shootings and critical incidents. We will go to the scene and monitor the force investigation from start to finish. We are advisory members of the Use of Force Review Board and disciplinary hearings, and we run the Community Police Mediation Program. We engage the community to ensure your voice, opinions, and concerns on policing matters are heard. We, your hosts, are not police officers, but we are experienced attorneys from the criminal legal field, dedicated to transparency and accountability. We encourage you to call in today with your questions, comments, and concerns. While we may not address individual cases, we are committed to following up with you. So with that, let's learn more about today's guest. Chriselle?
Today we are joined by two people from the Orleans Public Defender's Office, better known as the OPD, Alexis Chernow and Meg Garvey. Alexis Chernow has been a public defender in New Orleans for over 10 years and currently serves as the Orleans Public Defender's OPD Deputy Chief of Operations. Alexis has represented hundreds of clients on all levels of criminal matters and supervised dozens of OPD attorneys in their representation of indigent clients. Alexis has helped facilitate community-based efforts with partner organizations to change state laws to require unanimous jury verdicts to convict people of crimes, as well as to obtain local funding parity with the district attorney's office. Alexis also helped found the NOLA Defenders for Equal Justice, a nonprofit which sought to educate the New Orleans community about candidates running for local office within the criminal legal system. Alexis currently oversees OPD's trial division lawyers in criminal district court and municipal court. Alexis is also leading OPD's participation in a multi-agency technology upgrade spearheaded by the mayor's office to allow better communication of information between criminal legal system actors and update antiquated systems to ensure accuracy of case information and better access to case information. Prior to starting at OPD in 2014, Alexis was a law clerk to the Honorable John Trice Nixon Federal District Court for the Middle District of Tennessee. Meg Garvey is a career public defender and a legislative advocate for criminal justice reform. Meg was a founding member of the Orleans Public Defender's Office in 2006, where she currently serves as policy counsel. Meg has led campaigns to reform the criminal justice system, ensuring social workers for children in delinquency cases, improving expungement access for children, raising the age of criminal liability, and improving privacy protections for children. She has worked on behalf of New Orleans children and families as the managing director of Louisiana Center for Children's Rights, LCCR. Meg is the past president and the legislative chair of the Louisiana Association for Criminal Defense Lawyers, LACDL. She is also an appointee of the Louisiana Judicial Council. Meg is a respected expert leading many local and national training on legal issues. And thank you both, Meg and Alexis, for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So we just want to start because there's a bunch of common misconceptions that people have about the Orleans Public Defender's Office. And we just want to start establishing some basics of it and just clear that up for them right away. So let's our listeners know, what exactly is a public defender?
A public defender is somebody who represents a person who can't afford to hire their own lawyer.
Did you go to law school?
Absolutely. I went to Tulane University here in New Orleans.
So you're a lawyer?
Yeah, all public defenders that represent people in court are lawyers that had to pass the bar and go to law school.
Is anyone required to be a public defender?
No, it's actually something that people choose to do because they believe in it and they believe in supporting the Constitution.
So, like, sometimes in movies and TV shows, you might see, almost like a Mighty Ducks situation where there's like a big-time lawyer who is getting punished for something and they're ordered to be a public defender. Do you think that's not happening here, right?
That's not happening here. I mean, I do think that, judges can appoint lawyers. There's different systems in different places. In New Orleans, though, we actually have an office of people who are dedicated to performing this service, who have chosen to do this because it's something that they're passionate about. They're not doing it reluctantly.
So they're doing it full time. This is their career.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned that public defenders they represent people that can't afford to hire their own attorney.
Yeah.
So do they pay you?
No, our clients don't pay us. We are compensated. So, this is my job. I make a living doing this, as does Alexis, as does everyone else at our office, but we just don't get paid directly from our clients.
I think these are really important misconceptions. And just to be totally transparent, I used to be a public defender. This is Stella speaking. So I'm actually asking the same questions that my clients asked me all the time. I'm just not using the dreaded term public pretender, which I have to say really offended me.
Yes.
And by way of a side story, I remember after I won my first bench trial, that means the trial in front of a judge, my client texted me a thank you and told me one day when I'm a real lawyer, I'm going to be wonderful.
Yes.
And it was a very sweet thank you, but still grounded in confusion.
Yeah.
So that said, are there any other misconceptions or like questions that you might get from clients that you think are important to kind of clear the air on?
Yeah, I think we often get asked if we work for the state, Ooh,
And
yes.
are we working with the state? We get confused for the district attorneys often, and we don't work for the state. We get our funding from both the city and the state, but we do not in any way work for the state of Louisiana. Our sole client is our actual client. We're not beholden to the state to do anything. We're not required to do anything. We are not allowed to divulge anything in our representation with our clients to the state. So we don't work for the state. We don't work with the state, as in the district attorney's office.
Yeah.
We have to work in the courthouse with them, and we have to have communication with district attorneys to discuss cases and to figure out logistics for cases, getting discovery, figuring out when dates are going to happen, when they're going to bring witnesses in, things like that. But I think it is very common to hear people telling loved ones that that attorney's working with the state, and that's just not the case.
I mean, it's an adversarial system, right? And I think that if anybody wanted to dispel the notions, at least in New Orleans, I can only speak for our office, about this concept of a public defender or people working in collusion with the state, I think you could come into Tulane and Broad any day of the week and see our lawyers going to the mat for their clients. And I think it would dispel any doubt.
That is a really wonderful invitation. And I have to say to anybody who's listening, I just think that it would be a really interesting and informative experience to go to Tulane and Broad and to watch what happens there. It was an offer that we made back when Judge DeLarge was on the show. We advised people, go to criminal district courts, see what's happening to get a better understanding of the system. And I recommend it again. It is very illuminating. So can you tell us, when are you typically appointed to a case?
Well, in New Orleans, we do have a little bit of an advantage. It's not like this in other parts of the state, and I will say that is 100% due to a lack of funding and a lack of prioritization of the constitutional rights of poor people across the state. Fortunately for New Orleans, we do have the support of the city, and so we are able to provide more robust representation. So we are actually appointed right when people first get arrested. And that's not true everywhere. Sometimes people have to sit during the time period that the state has to make a decision about whether they're being prosecuted. Some of y'all listeners may know that we often call that DA time here in New Orleans. So a lot of people don't have a lawyer during that time, but we are there right from the beginning. We go and visit our clients, if not the day they're arrested, within a couple of days of their arrest. We learn about them. We learn about their families. We learn what are the allegations against them, and we start to get to work right away.
So there's a big advantage to that, and I just want to flag that for our listeners. The advantage is having an attorney appointed at arrest means that if there's valuable information out there, you can go out and immediately start filing motions to preserve evidence or to get evidence, and you can start building that relationship with your client. Now, when we're using this term appointed, that means that you are assigned. Do you get to pick your client?
No, we don't pick our clients, and our clients don't pick us. And I think it's important to underscore that, because I do think that while it can be frustrating, right, for us as public defenders to try to wade through this mythology of the public pretender and do all of that, I welcome that, and I think it's fair because our clients are not choosing who their lawyers are. And so I do think it's fair for us to build that trust, right? To explain any of their misconceptions away, because it's scary to be caught up in the system, right? It's a very vulnerable place. So yeah, no, we don't pick and they don't pick us.
Yep.
All right. So if you're appointed to a case, must you see that case through to the end?
Yes. Once you are assigned to a case, you are with that client until the disposition of the case. So until the case gets dismissed, until you go to trial, if the client takes a plea, any of that, you are there every step of the way. And generally, we have a case team that will also go through the life of the case with you, an investigator, potentially a client advocate, or a social worker also.
Well, so this might be a multi-year relationship.
Indeed.
Okay, so is it possible that you're ever just appointed for aspects of a case?
Generally not. I think we can be appointed for a probation revocation, which is after a disposition of a case. So once the case is over, you are on probation. You don't have a lawyer while you're on probation. If the state then decides they want to try to revoke your probation and put you in jail, you will get appointed a lawyer or the opportunity to hire a lawyer at that point. So if we get appointed for that, then that lawyer would only be appointed for that small piece of the post-disposition part of your case. But generally, once we're appointed, we're there until the case is done.
Okay. So when you're appointed to your clients, what decision makings do you have? Can you decide if the case goes to trial or not?
No. So the case is the client's case. We are there to help them gather information and to impart information about the law and the way the process works, and then help them make informed decisions. But ultimately, the decision about whether to go to trial is the client's. The decision about whether to go to trial in front of a judge or a jury is the client's. The decision about whether they want to testify or not testify is the client's decision. And we will talk through with them, and then they get to make those decisions.
And so I'm assuming the same goes if the client decides they want to plead guilty.
Correct.
Okay. And I know the Orleans Public Defender's Office often prides himself on being very client-centered. What does that actually mean to you?
I mean, I think in the long run, what it means is that we're looking to try to assist people in having good life outcomes and not just good case outcomes. And that's really up to them and what their values are and where they're at in that moment. But I also think it has to do with like really spending the time to explain every step of the process, to lay all the information out there, answer questions, sometimes repeatedly, because this stuff is complicated,
Absolutely.
right? And just be there for them and ask them, you know, what they want, like what do they value, what's most important to them in that moment.
So you're not building a case without them, you're building the case with them.
Yes.
So now that we understand some fundamentals about public defense, I would just like to know, why are you a public defender?
I am a public defender because I believe very strongly that everyone deserves the right to not just a defense, but the best defense possible when the state is trying to take away your freedom. And I think that the majority of the people who are charged with crimes in our community are poor and cannot afford lawyers. 85% of the people charged with crimes in Orleans Parish cannot afford a lawyer.
Wow.
And all of those people and all of their families and their communities are impacted the minute that they are touched by the system. And I think it's really important that people who care and who have the time and the energy and are willing to go to the mat on behalf of those people to let them have their voice be heard is really important. I think oftentimes, the perception is that the lawyers all talk and kind of make whatever happen in a case, or, you know, the defense lawyer tells the client, this is what we're going to do, and then they go to the court and they say it. But really, I think what's important is what the client wants and allowing that person to have as much autonomy as possible, because what is important to them is not necessarily what I would think is important to me or important to another person. And they deserve to have someone listen to them and actually act on their behalf.
So how has being a public defender, taking on this role, which sounds like almost an identity along with a career, how has it changed your perspective on the criminal legal system?
I mean, for me, even though, you know, as Alexis pointed out, there is definitely disparity in our system, especially here in Louisiana, when it comes to poverty, when it comes to race. But the truth of the matter is anyone could find themselves fighting for their liberty against the full force of the government. right? And I think that's a really big deal. I think a lot of times people are just thinking about the cops and robbers aspect of stuff and all the exciting things they see on TV, but really, ultimately, it is always a David and Goliath situation, right? We're talking about one individual person and the whole state of Louisiana. And so to the extent that I can balance that out a little bit, you know, I'm happy to do that, but it definitely has made me be concerned about civil rights and the possibility of government overreach. Yeah.
Wow, that is frightening to think about, but also very honest, and I really appreciate that perspective. So I have to say, I feel inspired listening to y'all already. So if there is anyone listening to this show that also feels inspired to check out the Orleans Public Defenders, to like say volunteer, intern, or even apply for a job, what would you say to them? How do they do that?
Yeah. So first of all, when you use the word public defender, it's not just lawyers, right? We could not do our job well without the support that we have from the whole team, right? So we didn't explain before, like our clients are represented by whole team. So we have investigators who go out and talk to witnesses and take pictures and gather evidence, right? We have social workers that really work with our clients that are struggling with trauma and addiction and mental health issues and struggles of raising families in poverty. And so I would say that there's lots of opportunities for people to serve their community in this way, even if they don't go to law school. I will also say this job is never boring. And I think the one thing about it, I mean, I've been doing it for like 20 years now. You constantly are being required to learn something new, and, you know, learn a whole new science that you didn't know. But ultimately, what I think is so great about it is that it's a lot of responsibility, but it truly is an honor to be able to serve your community in this way and to get to know your community through this work.
Yeah. And I will say that our office is very united in that everyone has this passion for this type of work. And so you are in a really strong community, even just within the office, of like-minded individuals who show each other a lot of support and really help each other out, because sometimes the work is really difficult.
Yeah.
And I think that's amazing. I know we talked about how the OPD is very client-centered and explaining how your team works, especially with social workers, investigators, and all those things. That shows how much you know, the office values trying to do everything that they can for their client and what their client wants. So that's amazing. I commend you all for that.
Thank you.
So if anybody is interested, you should check out their website, and you can also follow them on social media. Their handle is Orleans Public Defenders, all one word. And they're on Instagram, they're on social media. You can learn more about the office, and you can find out if this is the right career path for you, from being an investigator, an administrator, a part of the defense team, or being a public defender or an intern for a summer. Check them out.
Absolutely.
So I do want to flag that OPD, one big element of your website, of your practice, is the community. This idea of being community-oriented public defense. Now, that feels a little jargony. Can you break that down for us? What does that mean?
Well, first of all, nobody exists on a little island, right? And so everything that takes place in the criminal justice system has sort of like reverberating effects, right? Every arrest, every prosecution, you know, every acquittal, every crime, right? All of those things impact the larger community. And I mean, nobody's more impacted than all of this than the children in our community. And so I think the way that we see it is that we feel that even though we already have a lot of responsibility with our casework, we do feel that it is important to be connected to the community, to know what's going on and see how we can improve things in the larger community. I think, you know, we all know that a healthier community is going to be a safer community, that a more, you know, community feels supported and heard. That's going to reduce crime. So, I mean, it all kind of connects together.
So, Meg, you're talking about the community and how, it's important for you all to get to know the community and make sure you know what's going on. So let's get into that a little bit. It's a common critique for the OPD that you aren't from New Orleans. So how do you respond to that criticism?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say that that's true across the board. We have lots of staff who are born and bred in New Orleans. So number one, it's not true. Number two, I would say that while we do recruit both locally and nationally, connection to the community, commitment to the community are definitely things that we look for, right? We have people applying to work at our office from all the Ivy League schools, right? That's not enough to get you in the door. It's actually very competitive to work at our office. And so we're looking for people who have staying power, right? For people who want to make their home here and for people who feel excited about living in New Orleans, feel excited about celebrating the culture of New Orleans, and really want to be a part of this community. As to me, I've lived here since before Katrina. I evacuated during Katrina. During Katrina, I was all over the state trying to find people who had been trapped in Sheriff Guzman's jail where he refused offers to evacuate them before the storm. And I traveled all around the state finding all of those people. And that's kind of how I ended up becoming a public defender. So it was my connection to the community and my love for the city and my desire to fight for this city while it was in crisis that led me to public defense. And so if you ask me where I went to high school, am I going to get a sheepish look on my face? Absolutely. I did not grow up here, but I've been here for a really long time. This is the city that I love and where I've chosen to make my home, and I think that's reflective of people in our office.
So the public defender's office is not somewhere you just come and get your, get your boots wet, get some knowledge and get some information and then take it back somewhere else.
Right. We are specifically looking for and hiring people who are willing to make a commitment to become part of this community if they're not already here. And we are recruiting locally as well because obviously people who have their families here already have an investment in the community. So I think, we are stronger as we have people who stay at the office, right? I've been at the office for 11 years. Meg's been at the office since before the office. So, and that is really important to us. We want people who are going to stick around. We've tried to do a lot of work within the office to make the office a career office, somewhere that you can come, and if you want to stay, you can stay, and you can, make a career out of public defense, which is not true everywhere. It's a burnout job, and that's kind of, I think, one of the conceptions of public defense is that it's really hard, and so you just do it for a few years to get some trial experience, and then you go work at a firm or, go do something cush. And we are looking for and finding people who this is what they want to do. This is not the stepping stone to the next thing.
Plus, we need people who can pronounce Tchoupitoulas in front of the jury.
Next time, ask them to spell it.
Honestly,
Come on now.
I remember quite a few times being asked how to pronounce streets in front of Judge Willard. Quite a few times. And if I knew the names of former schools.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
We love Judge Willard, but he will definitely put you through your paces.
So those public defenders that actually come from out of state that, you have the staying power to stay here and be committed to our community. How do you teach them about the community that they're practicing in?
Well, a lot of it is just getting out into the community. We work with partner organizations, and we try to be a part of community events that are happening. And we put the younger lawyers, the younger investigators, the people that are coming from out of town to take these jobs into these places in the community so that they can actually find spaces for themselves in the New Orleans community, and they can meet people, meet their neighbors, meet other people that live here, and feel like they can start to understand, because New Orleans is a very unique community. We have like a very rich culture here, and we have a very welcoming community. I think of the places that I have lived, New Orleans is the only place where I can say every house I've lived in, I know my neighbors and they know me. Every neighborhood that I've lived in, I've known the person at my local coffee shop. Like, that is a unique thing. It's a beautiful thing about New Orleans, and it's a thing that we, I think, do try to make concerted efforts to get people involved early on.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you become a part of the community and you know where you have dumb shoes at, right?
Even the local, the corner store people, they'll know you.
Yeah.
So let's pivot to talking about how public defenders know another aspect of our community being law enforcement and police. How do public defenders interact with the police?
The police are, the police are the people who arrest our clients, right? But the police are also, the people that our clients often call when they're in trouble, right? And so they serve as witnesses, right? And I think sometimes people think like the police work for the DA, right? And I mean, and maybe some police officers see it that way too. I don't know that they all do, but they don't, right? They are witnesses just like any other witness. And so when we get information from the police, we start to look at, well, maybe there's some other information out there that they didn't have in terms of talking to other witnesses that they didn't talk to, or in terms of looking at surveillance, or in terms of hearing our clients or their family's story. And so the main interaction that we have with police as public defenders is that they are witnesses.
Okay.
Interesting.
So what do you think? What have you been able to observe about the police department or police officers from seeing them as witnesses, from seeing them in this capacity? What have you learned about the way that the city is policed?
I mean, I think there's some racial disparity in the way that the city is policed, but
Talk
that's
to
not
us about that.
necessarily. I mean, I think that there's still a feeling amongst a lot of people in the community that the police are there to sort of monitor them and catch them doing bad things, right?
Okay.
I don't think that that's the role of the police. I don't think that that is how all NOPD officers view things. I think in some ways it could be a misconception. I don't know if it's always a misconception. But so I do think that there's some issues there, whereas people in certain neighborhoods feel that the police are there to protect them. People in other neighborhoods feel that the police are there to like get them in trouble, right? And so I think that's still something that we all collectively need to work to overcome.
So you've been able to see firsthand the work that the police are doing every single day. What do you think about NOPD's police reports?
I think that, I mean, it very much depends on the type of case. I think if you are looking at homicide reports, homicide detectives, it is very clear they have a lot of training on types of investigation to do and how to write a report. And so it's very thorough. I think if you're looking at a lower level, you know, a domestic violence call, something that is going to be handled by an officer with less experience and less training, it is clear from a lot of these police reports that these officers are not spending a lot of time investigating. And I won't say that as a criticism because I just don't know if that's because they don't have the time because they are so busy,
Right.
or if that's the protocol. I don't know. But I do know that oftentimes police reports on smaller cases are very short and are missing a lot of what we would then think of as necessary investigation, of talking to extra witnesses, of going back afterwards. Usually the entire incident is wrapped up in one report the night the officer gets out there, and that's kind of it.
So that's important for us to know. In a lot of cities, a big issue that police oversight has, and truthfully everyone in the criminal legal system has, is this idea of form language, of police officers not writing their own police reports, just dropping in language that's prepared for them by, you know, some other mechanism. And so it's important for us to hear this feedback about how police officers are actually writing their reports. All of this is a component of your investigation, and all of this will determine whether or not the right person was arrested and then charged for the appropriate offense, and whether or not all the information that was gained was done so legally, ethically. And this is all information that we need to be able to wean out from a police report. So in that vein, how do you think NOPD is testifying in trial if you had to give them a letter grade?
I really think it depends on the case. And I want to be clear, right? It's not just like NOPD only comes and says bad things about our clients and we're at war with them all the time, right? A lot of the time the officers are coming to court because we have subpoenaed them. So they are often witnesses for us because we believe they have other information that we think, could be helpful. Maybe something that they saw contradicts what another witness said. Maybe they gathered more information after that first call was made that, adds shed some more light on the matter. So, I really do think it depends on the case and that officer. I do feel like sometimes, and I feel like this is more the case maybe with some like newer officers, like when they come to testify, you can tell that they think we're there to like beat them up. They think we're there to like trick them or put words in their mouth. And I have to say, like, I can't do that. I don't have magic powers, right? And sometimes when we're asking, was it on the left or was it on the right? We're really just asking, was it on the left or was it on the right? Like, we're not trying to trick you. We're not trying to harass you. We understand that you have a tough job. It's really just a straightforward question. But sometimes I get the sense that they think we're trying to string them up or put them in a trick bag. And it's like, we don't really have the power to do that, you know?
And it's crazy that you mentioned that. I do. I know an officer that once told me that they had to go testify in some trials. It was a couple of years ago. And that was exactly what they said. It's like, I don't know, the public defender, it was a public defender actually. They're going to get up there and they're going to try to trick me up. They're going to, I was like, I don't think that's what they're going to try to do. No. I said, they're probably just going to try to get you to testify whatever you have in your report. Read your report and testify truthfully. Yeah. That is all.
That's it. That's it. Yeah.
Well, and I think sometimes the state will ask some of the questions, right? They will ask the officer to talk about the things that are helpful for the prosecution. And so then it is our job to then ask them about the other part of their investigation that maybe is not as helpful for the prosecution, but the jury, if it's a jury, or the judge, if it's a judge, needs the full story.
So in those situations, I'm going to move us. So we've been talking about the police as they can be very helpful resources for a criminal defense, but in police oversight, we also have to talk about, what happens when they lie. What happens when they're testifying in a way that does not match their police report at all, or what happens when they're saying things that are totally not true. So if you believe your client has experienced police misconduct, what do you do? If you believe this officer is lying, what do you do?
I think it really depends on the case. I think when it comes to a trial or a hearing, I think we just try to marshal all of the other information that fleshes out the big picture and may impeach or contradict what that officer is saying. That's not always easy, right? The police and the state still have a lot of power, and so it can be really frustrating when you feel like you're not able to get all of that information in front of somebody. I will say that it's better than it used to be when I first started.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So when I first was a public defender, and I was working on like felonies, but they were like simple drug possession, or what we called a throwdown case, right? A throwdown case was where the police wrote up a report and said that they chased your client, or they were trying to talk to your client, and your client ran, and your client threw down either drugs or a gun, right? And then they picked it up, and then they charged your client with it. So the reason that it's legally significant to write a report where somebody throws something down is that if somebody abandons property, they no longer have the same constitutional rights as far as probable cause to be searched, et cetera, right? So I used to have a lot of cases like that. And when we would go out in the community to talk to people, they would say, actually, I saw what happened and that's not it. You know, I was a witness that I saw, and the police report is totally not true. And I would say to them, great, I'm going to subpoena you to come to court, and you can tell the judge your side of the story. Because they would often just be like a grandma that's like sitting out minding her children on the front porch, right? That is not involved in any crime or, you know, not in cahoots with anybody, no reason to tell a story. And they would just get really upset and be very scared and say that they didn't want to come. And I think there were a few reasons for that, and there's a couple of things that have changed since then. So at that time, remember, there was no body cam. And so everything was just based on an officer's word versus a person who may have prior convictions, right? Who may come to court like looking shabby, or for some reason maybe not be on equal footing in a judge or a jury's eyes with a police officer. So just as an aside, since body cam has come into place in New Orleans, I don't see these throwdown cases. So I'm not, you know, I'm just saying, you know, correlation, causation, maybe two different things, but we don't have those cases anymore. So, so there's that. So we have the body cam, right, as almost like an additional witness, right? So that's a big difference. The other difference is that I think historically, and I don't want to totally get us off topic, but I think it's relevant and kind of ties in a lot of the things that we were talking about. Historically, it was very difficult for people in New Orleans to make a complaint against the police, right? People felt like certain neighborhoods, right, by certain rogue officers felt like they were really under a stranglehold and they didn't know what to do. They lived in fear of police officers, and they had good reason to, right?
Right.
We have a very scary history in our city of police officers committing violence against people and killing people, right?
Literally beating people to death.
Yes. And so back to my story about the throwdowns, when I would talk to these witnesses, they would say, no, I'm afraid because I know that police officer and he's always out here and he's going to do, you know, X, Y, and Z to me. And I would just be kind of like, really? Like, this is crazy. But I kept hearing the story over and over and over again. Well, lo and behold, fast forward, the police officer that they were talking about was eventually convicted in federal court in connection to a situation in which he killed somebody with his bare hands.
Right. What was the name of that officer?
Melvin Williams?
Yeah.
Flat Top.
Yes.
Yeah.
Flat Top.
So he was known in the community as Flat Top, and he was considered kind of a boogeyman. Like, people were really, really scared. And I think that when you have those kinds of things going on and there's not that level of transparency in the community, people are scared to come forward. People are scared to tell the truth. And I think growing trust with the police is going to lead to more witness participation, whether it's for the defense or for the prosecution.
Well said. And I think you're really kind of hitting on this idea of a crossover that might exist between public defense or just defense in general and police oversight, because you're seeing and you're hearing firsthand where officers are doing problematic policing practices that are influencing the community, the clients, the witnesses. So how do you think police oversight and public defense sometimes interacts?
Well, I think that, like what you said, we really have eyes on the ground, right? We read so many police reports every day. We are, you know, questioning officers on witness stands all the time, and we see the same officers over and over again. So we can see patterns of behavior, like you were talking about with language in police reports. We have had issues in the past where same report, like, take out this intersection, put in separate intersection, take out this defendant name, put in that defendant name, you know, and it's the exact same. And so that is something that if you are just one-off involved in a case, you don't know that that happened 3 other times to 3 other people exactly the same. But in our position where we're seeing so many of these cases, we really can start to see some of those patterns of behavior, and, you know, officers in certain districts or maybe certain types of squads, right, when they have the special units, and the way that they act.
And, you know, I just want to flag, that we frequently, but I mean the Office of the Independent Police Monitor, we work with the Public Defender's Office, just like we work with the District Attorney's Office, and to be able to hear these concerns that might be coming up. And they come up on both sides. Prosecutors don't want to bring cases for officers that they don't believe are credible. If they think that they're dishonest, they don't have integrity, that their searches are bad, their police reports are questionable, they're not going to want to bring those charges. And then public defenders will be able to see how those patterns are playing out for their clients. And in theory, we all meet for the U.S. Attorney's Working Group on the consent decree. And this is where we talk about some of those patterns, some of those big picture items, and we address them in terms of, does this mean the police department is complying with aspects of the consent decree or not? Or is there something else that we need to do outside of the consent decree to be able to address these concerns? So while I'm talking about collaborations that are happening, I would love if you could let us know about some of these local collaborations that I know that y'all have to be able to address some of these big picture issues that might be coming up in our criminal legal system or in the way we police. I know I'm kind of taking you all over the place.
Well, yeah. I mean, so a big part of my job, right, is I go to the legislature, right, and I advocate for and against bills that I think are in, the best interest of the community. And so I definitely think that there are some things that have happened, there at the legislature that we've worked with other groups. So, the ACLU, Promise of Justice Initiative, Justice and Accountability Center, Vote. I could go on and on, right? But we're sort of constantly in touch with these groups, monitoring what they're going on, what they're doing, what initiatives there are. We are often the source of information for these other groups, right? Where they come to us and say, like, we're hearing this. Are you seeing this pattern in what's going on in court? Are you seeing this complaint amongst your clients, right? And so that could be for groups that are dealing with how the jail is run and how people are treated when they're in custody. That could be having to do with, like, the Innocence Project, when they have questions about how evidence is being stored, and witnesses, that are, especially police officers, that, maybe there's some credibility issues there, some behavior patterns there, with Vote, with, like, how people who have been through the system are being treated differently or being disenfranchised. Like, we do keep in touch with all of these groups. We do have, like, community meetings where we strategize and brainstorm and share. We lean on each other for support. When I first started, there were not a lot of other organizations like this. It was a lot lonelier of a place to be. And I do feel a lot more supported. And I do feel like our community is better for having so many people who are willing to kind of put their blood, sweat, and tears. But I will shout out the Police Monitor, because back to what we were saying about, collaborating, about oversight and the importance of that to our community and, quite frankly, to the police. Like, I just feel like it's better for them and better working conditions for them when things are on the up and up, right? But in the past, I represented people who had issues with the police where they were being harassed and treated poorly by the police. And I tried to assist them in making a complaint through the police department. And at that time, I was told, first of all, we were treated very rudely. Second of all, I was not permitted to remain in the room with my client while he was giving information. And he had an open case at the time. It was a low-level municipal case. He wasn't at risk of going to jail or anything. Nevertheless, right, he wanted a lawyer to be there to support him, which I think is a very reasonable request. It's intimidating, right? And so that was the world that we operated in before. And so I think, like, there's a lot more feeling of confidence and interconnectedness now that we have an independent emphasis on independent police monitor. I just think it makes everybody feel a lot safer and more secure knowing that there's someone that they can go to with these complaints.
Well, thank you so much. That is beautiful feedback to hear. And I want to be very clear, we did not pay anyone for that feedback.
Yes.
So if
Free
you-
advertising.
We have free advertising for our office, and a wonderful reminder to everybody that that we're here, we're a resource. But also, if you're out there and you think you experienced police misconduct and you happen to have an open criminal matter, just as a reminder, probably talk to your attorney prior to talking to anyone else. I mean, what would you advise?
Yeah, I would advise that. And I think since we're dispelling misconceptions, right?
Yes, please.
I think that this idea of like, don't talk to the police until you have a lawyer. I think a lot of people think like, oh, that's because you and your lawyer are going to get in there and cook up a story, right? You could try to do that, but it's not going to work because there's evidence and witnesses and whatever. The reason for that, right, is that things can be taken out of context, especially when you're scared, you're under stress, or you're angry, or you're confused, or drunk, you know?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
and so I think it's just more important to be able to take a breather. And I will note that when police are under investigation, right, they absolutely have a long period of time. I can't remember what it is now. Y'all should know.
14 days.
Yeah, so they have 14 days before they're ever interviewed, right? And that is time for them to get a lawyer. And it's my understanding they're automatically supplied with a lawyer. So it's not really about like, oh, sneak around and don't tell anybody anything because like, you know, you're guilty, right? That goes for everybody. Right. And I think it's in everybody's best interest. And I think it's a little bit of a goose and gander situation, you know, like if it's right for the police, it's right for everybody because once again, we're going back to one person with the full force of the state on them.
Yeah. And just by way of explanation, that is true that whenever we monitor misconduct investigations that are done into police officers, and it's pretty rare that you're seeing a police officer go to give their statement without having an attorney present.
Right.
And it's just because, and these are for administrative investigations. This is like an administrative thing, not necessarily a criminal matter. But it's important and helpful to have that type of resource there. So we appreciate you giving that level of clarity. So with our final moment, I want to ask the fun question of if you could wave a magic wand as a public defender and change one thing about the way that New Orleans is policed, what would it be?
Wow.
I know. It's hard
That's a big one for the last one, right?
for the last one.
I mean, I think that this is sort of something that we've talked about frequently, and maybe not the biggest wish, but we do have a lot more entities policing New Orleans that are not an OPD now
That's
than
right.
we used to.
That's right.
Troop NOLA is the big one, but there's also federal task forces. There's levee police. There's Hano police. There's just a lot of different entities that are not bound by the same policies as NOPD. So, for instance, we've seen a lot of police chases in the last couple of years that we hadn't seen before, and they're all state trooper chases. And that's because Louisiana State Police does not have to follow the same protocol before they initiate a chase. It is very difficult for NOPD to initiate a chase unless they know that there's a crime of violence and like they check a bunch of boxes and then they get approval in the moment from, I think, a rank. That's not the case for LSP, and so there have been a lot more chases. I think it is really difficult for the community to be faced with a lot of different law enforcement treating them very differently, approaching them very differently. And I think that has put a little bit more fear back into people of law enforcement generally. So I think if we could get everyone, and I know Meg has tried this in the past, but get everyone on the same page of what is the policy of how you're going to police in this city, and everyone does it so we all know what the expectation is and what our rights are, I think that would go a long way.
That is a very pragmatic, and actually impactful wish to have with your wand. So thank you. And Meg, if you had a magic wand, what would you wish everyone would do on March 29th?
Go vote.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not over, y'all. And I know, I know people get exhausted because we have so many elections and there's always something coming up. There are 4 amendments that are on there, and it's very, very important that you show up. It only takes a second. It's really easy to figure out how to vote. You could vote the same way for all of them. But I will say that, it's very important because I think that sometimes things sneak through, and sometimes it seems that things were intentionally created to try to sneak them through. And I know your listeners are smarter than that. So please go vote on March 29th.
Thank you so
go
much.
vote. So that wraps up today's episode of The Monitor's Mic. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to all our listeners for tuning in and staying engaged with the crucial conversations we're having about police oversight and community safety. A special thank you to Meg Garvey and Alexis Chernow of the Orleans Public Defender's Office for their informative and illuminated perspective on public defense and policing in New Orleans. Also, as a reminder, make your plan to vote this March. If you missed any part of today's show or want to catch up on past episodes, visit our website, www.nolaipm.gov. You can find and follow us on YouTube at NOLA IPM. You can also follow us on social media for updates and news. On Instagram, it's NOLA OIPM, and on Facebook, it's New Orleans Independent Police Monitor. Until next time, stay informed, stay involved, and stay committed to building a safer community. And this has been The Monitor's Mic.